I invite you to lower your gaze or close your eyes, whatever feels comfortable for you as we go into meditation. God of all, we call you by so many names. Some say the divine, some say God, some say Jesus, Creator, Abba. So many names. But all of those names are for one. Today, we praise you, Lord, for Brother Sun, who is the day, and through whom you give us light. We offer praise today to you for Sister Moon and all the stars. You formed them clear and precious and beautiful. We thank you for Brother Wind and the air and every kind of weather through which you give sustenance to your creatures. We praise you for the generous nature of Sister Water, water which gives us life. We thank you for Brother Fire, through whom you light the night. We thank you for Mother Earth, who sustains us and produces fruits and flowers for our needs. We ask you, dear one, to help us, to draw us closer to the endless forms of nature in which you dwell, in which we all dwell. We ask you to help us experience you and your endless love and the creativity that you pour into every person, every place, everything. Remind us to give our tenderest care to all of our creations, including ourselves and all those whose lives we touch. And now, we will take a few moments in the silence to listen for God's voice and to give gratitude in silence. Creator of all, we are filled with gratitude for all your gifts to us. And so it is. Amen. Feel free to slowly come back to this time and this place. No hurry. Good morning.
Good morning.
I love seeing all these beautiful Sunday morning faces. Faces of people that I love, faces that are doing the good work in here and out there. One of the greatest blessings that I've received from my long years of being in this church is my husband, Joe. And as you heard, today is our very first wedding anniversary. And I rarely wear a dress, as I'm sure regular attendees know, but I thought it's been a year since I last wore one, so. Today's message is about the role of nature, the rocks, the trees, the hills, the creeks, the animals, the wind, in our spirituality. I'm sure you agree that the natural world is one of the Creator's greatest gifts to us. Yes? Yes. But I have been reminded recently that nature is much, much more than that. This message will take us from a metaphysical viewpoint of nature to a more contemplative approach, and finally to a sacred conversation with the world of nature itself. The three guides are going to take us into a deeper understanding of our relationship with nature. We'll get back to that in just a moment. First, though, I have a story. On Friday, July 3rd, Joe and I were in downtown Kent with my kids, awaiting the annual fireworks display. At about 9 o'clock, the weather became more and more ominous. Some of you might remember that day. The wind whipped up and the blue sky turned black with dark clouds. So we figured there weren't going to be any fireworks, and we didn't want to get electrocuted by the lightning, so we gathered our chairs and ran for the cars. As we scurried along, huge gusts of wind pushed us back, pushed against us. I am a lover of wind. I love the power of it, but this was almost too much even for me. And then the rain poured down. When we got home, the car's headlights revealed a totally different landscape than we had left just an hour ago. A huge cherry tree at the edge of the woods had fallen. Amazingly, it had not taken out the fence that surrounds the woods. It had not taken our little barn that sits right next to the fence. Miraculously, it fell right between the two. It did tear out our flagpole, pull it out of the earth. We could see the flags lying in the mud under the branches. My son Andrew the next day picked him up and he said, looked at the American flag and he said, well, this is not a surprise. He's kind of cynical. But we were immediately filled with gratitude that so little damage had occurred. We didn't know until later that this tree that had looked so healthy had been dying from the inside out. Its interior was all hollow, and no wonder it had fallen. I had been hoping that day to have more time with my kids because they were all in town that week. Little did I know how my wish would be fulfilled. Early the next morning, as Joe headed outside to begin the cleanup, my 4 kids and their spouses showed up to help. I was the chief cook and gopher for the crew, so I kept everyone hydrated and fed and ran to the store when that was necessary. At one point, as we were out there, all of us with the tree, we stopped every once in a while and sort of gazed at the tree. I don't know if we were studying it or what the others were feeling when they looked at it. I think it was partly to figure out how to deal with the huge mess and how to get the tree itself fell above the fence, but taking it off of the fence was the key. How do we get it off without killing the fence? But for me, all of that was a side issue to what I felt at that moment. I was thinking of the many years the tree had stood there, and how many squirrels and birds it had sheltered, and how much shade it had given to the other animals and to us. I thought of how quickly life can change. Just as big trees can fall in an instant, this can happen to people too, and to many other entities and creatures. I saw this as a holy moment, a moment of gratitude and a moment of awe, and also goodbye to a lovely tree. I found myself wondering, what does this tree represent? How does this tree relate to oneness with God, to our sacred connection with all things? First, I saw oneness in my family. My oldest son, Jay, stood behind his brother Mike, his hands firmly resting on Mike's back to steady him, as Mike stood at a very awkward angle to try to saw the tree down. Two men joined together, not squabbling like they usually do. And here, whoops, here they aren't. There they are. So, next I saw my daughter, who knows a bit about trees, quietly suggesting how to brace the tree to keep it from breaking the fence as it fell the rest of the way down. Let me put this one on. She touched the tree with care as she spoke. It reminded me of how she touches her daughter. Then she showed us a tiny miracle. An acorn was growing inside the dead tree. How wondrous is that? That a dead cherry tree could shelter the seed of an oak tree. That's some strong mojo there. Then something else happened that I choose to call another miracle. Several deer came out of the woods, including a fawn, into the midst of a family of humans, and despite the ear-splitting racket of the power saw, it was so loud, they stopped only 6 feet away from us. And they began munching on the pile of the soft, twiggy branches that were the first to be cut off the tree trunk. I guess they consider twigs and leaves a delicacy, one that's worth getting near us to get to. I was amazed. With all that noise, there they were. There was a moment when I stood with my husband, my youngest son, his fiancée, and my son-in-law as we watched Mike finish the first major cut that severed the tree from its shattered stump. We were quiet witnesses, and that moment felt like a prayer to me. We're going to leave the cherry tree story behind now. It's time to get metaphysical. The first of our 3 guides is my beloved Father Richard Rohr, who says, quote, "We have forgotten that our lives are an inherent part of a much greater story." I'll just leave that up for a while. Father Richard's statement can apply to many things. For example, the fact that we live in our own little bubbles, especially since COVID. We can easily avoid being with other people if we want to, because our phones and our laptops can deliver whatever we need right to our door. We choose to believe whatever we want, ignoring actual facts if we want to, because the online world will always provide plenty of voices to agree with our viewpoint. Isn't that comforting? Just to agree with us, never to challenge us. We are insulated from the pain of other people, aren't we? Because we can simply block it all out. We can filter it. We have the luxury of choice about all things to an extent that is not even dreamed of in most of the world. If we are moved to help those in need, we can, with a keystroke or two, send money. And that's good. And yet, it allows us to maintain layers of separation between ourselves and other people. The bottom line is that we, at least here in the Western world, can comfortably live separately from one another, although I doubt that this will work long term. But that's a story for another day. Father Richard explains that before technology was even imagined, before human beings ever walked the earth, before any Bible or holy text was ever written, there was wisdom and harmony in this world. And that is what we have forgotten, most of all. Our primal connection to nature. And Jim is smiling. Nature teaches us that we all belong to one another, that everything that exists is part of a sacred, interconnected universe. We here at Unity believe that, don't we? We are constantly seeking connection with all that is. And there's no greater example of oneness than the natural world. The main stumbling block for humans is achieving oneness. Of course, we can believe in it, but there's something that gets in the way of that. A little word called ego. Such a little word for such a big issue. This is why we need nature, because nature is always ready to step in and show us a better way. Nature always leads by example. Our egos cannot control nature, which is a humbling truth, because nature can't be controlled. Its endless cycles of birth and death and change have been playing out day by day, century by century, without any input from us, thank you very much. Although we can and do cause harm to nature, again, that's a topic for another day. Nature is our greatest spiritual teacher if we listen, if we watch, if we are willing to learn. Rohr offers several spiritual lessons we can glean from nature. Creation itself is the first revelation. Long before there were written scriptures, including the book of Revelation, the cosmos was already revealing the wisdom and glory of the divine. Next, nature reinforces humility and letting go. We cannot manipulate nature, we can't fix it, well, maybe we could, or we can't permanently control it. When we spend time outdoors, I feel, and maybe you do too, a humble feeling because of the breadth and depth and beauty of it all, how much larger it is than we are. When we do that, our ego can sometimes adjust to reality rather than trying to dominate it. And the cycle of life and death. Birth and death are natural spiritual teachers. Nature teaches that loss and change are necessary parts of a whole, healthy spiritual life. Finally, nature is interconnected. Everything, including us, has an inner blueprint or soul. Those of you who were at the women's retreat last week know that we each have an individual soul print, too. We instinctively realize that God is present in all things, teaching us to honor the inherent dignity of all creation, not just ourselves, our little selves. We are simply part of nature. Contrary to popular belief, we were never intended to have dominion over it. We're just a little part of it. So we'll say thanks now to Father Richard and move on to our next guide, St. Francis of Assisi, who will reveal a contemplative view of nature. Years ago, I had the good fortune to visit Assisi. Of all the places we visited on that trip, it was Assisi that touched me the most deeply. Not the magnificent basilica where Francis is buried. I am sure he would have much preferred the money that went to build that be used to feed the poor. It wasn't the beautiful cathedral and the other holy sites that were next by, such as St. Clare's tomb and her cathedral, but it was the feeling of peace, the sense of reverence I felt there. Assisi is a town about the same size as my town of Kent. They have 28,000 people. But even with all those tourists that were there, it didn't feel touristy. It was quiet. It felt holy. Gazing at the hills dotted with olive trees, I felt deeply connected to the humble saint who had spent his entire life right about where I was standing. It was beautiful. I have revered Francis since my childhood. Not just because I was raised Catholic, but because he seemed a little bit more approachable than most of the saints in my prayer book, many of whom were martyrs. Of course, this was detailed in total detail in the prayer books and then given to children to read. Most of them were martyrs. It was pretty scary as an impressionable child to read about the gruesome deaths of some of the saints. For years, I hoped and prayed that I would never be asked to die for my faith. I worried that I could never pass such a test. I thought that I would probably denounce God in a heartbeat, which meant, of course, I might avoid a horrible death, but I would probably get a one-way ticket to hell instead. Out of the frying pan. But I digress. One day, I was given a St. Francis prayer card. This changed everything. I mean, what child couldn't relate to a saint who was usually depicted surrounded by birds and bunnies and bears? I thought, I can get into this guy. As I grew up, I learned that Francis didn't just love animals, he saw divinity in them. He saw God in them. His life was, by his own choice, not an easy one. And yet, he simply could not contain the joy that filled him in every moment because he saw God in everything and everyone, especially in the natural world, as we call it. This was a totally new concept to me. I could see God in nature. I thought nature was that and God was this, you see. Francis felt such a deep connection to all things, all people. The sight of a grasshopper could send him into ecstasy because he experienced God in the grasshopper. The song of a bird brought him to tears because its voice was, to Francis and to me, God's voice. Even a lowly worm would be tenderly carried to a grassy place lest it get crushed by a human foot on the road, because it was all, to Francis, all God. My first knowledge of oneness was thanks to Francis. I could feel how overwhelmed he felt because he realized that God was in everything. Here at Unity, we often speak of oneness, and we work towards it, and we talk about God's presence in all things. Yet when I looked at it through Francis's eyes, I was humbled and overwhelmed at the magnitude of what God is. It's not possible for us to fully understand because the dimensions of God are infinite. How, I wondered, could we possibly grasp the gift of Godness in everything? It's just too much to me to hold it, especially when you look around outside. So that question leads us to our third guide. It's me. I wanted to deepen my understanding about God and everything, so you'll now get a bird's eye view, pun intended, of some sacred conversations I've been having with nature. Inspired by Francis and by my memory of the tranquility of Assisi, I approached today's talk in a new way. Usually, I agonize a lot. I print tons of stuff from internet searches, and then I comb through some of my spiritual books and readings, and then I start writing, and then I pray for guidance, and I say, please help. This is a bunch of stuff. What is it? What is it? This time, I didn't do that. This time, I did a little bit of research, but for the most part, I simply sat out in the backyard in my wicker chair. That's all I did. It was a miracle. Like cows in a green pasture, how they migrate, to be under the trees when the sun is too warm, I leisurely moved my chair here and there, seeking out the shady spots whenever the sun's light became too bright. I did this for a considerable time over several days, and if you know me, you know the kind of energy I have. I usually can't sit still. But I just sat there, days on end. I did come in the house to eat and everything, but I just felt relaxed. I wasn't stressing about getting the message done. I jotted down a couple notes, but mostly I gazed long and deep at the trees, the grass, the stones, the animals, and I murmured aloud my heartfelt thanks to each of them, to all that I saw. I guess we could call this a visual meditation. This began a beautiful learning experience for me. It became a prayer. I was simply being, which I seldom do, and then I became amazed because I was being, I was soon seeing with different eyes. And that all led to feeling. And then the doors of nature really opened up to me. Early one morning, as I sat at the edge of the woods, listening to the various birds calling to each other, I felt so centered. I felt that I was part of the birds' conversation. And here's what their songs whispered to me. Ours is the voice of God. God calls to you through us, reminding you that you are home when you're near us in the woods. You think I'm crazy, I'm sure. I gazed for a while, quite a while, at one of Joe's wood piles. When he trims trees, he leaves the smaller branches and sticks in piles for the animals to use. A chipmunk appeared and then disappeared into one of the crevices at the bottom of the pile. As she went, she whispered, "Do you see? God is in me too." One of my favorite animals caught my attention next, a black squirrel. He too approached the woodpile, which he perched atop as he spoke with me. "There's a lot here in the woodpile for me to use in my nest. Or if a predator comes between me and my tree, I can hide in the branches and sticks until it's safe to come out." And then he slowed down a little bit so I could follow him better. He said, "God within me is here to remind you that life is about traveling through hills and valleys, ups and downs, back and forth, and responding with your bravest self to everything you encounter." And then he scampered up into the branches of one of the tall trees. The wind gently encircled me too. One of my greatest loves is the wind, and it was saying to me, "I am here too, and I am God too." As the wind kicked up, everything was swirling around, and Spirit gently said, "Let it all go. Pay attention only to me." I found that I had tears in my eyes. The nearby creek burbled in the background. My heart intuitively told me that this is a holder of secrets. The creek holds many secrets, that it contains the living water of absolution, of divine connection, of God. Is it possible, I wondered, that weeds too carry God within? What I saw next made me a believer. There was a 10-foot high, picture that, 10 feet high tree stump, and out of it was growing an even taller weed right into the center of it. The message I got was, "I am here to remind you to keep growing, always. It isn't for you to decide what's dead, what's a worthless weed. Turn to me when you seek to see God as possibility." I examined a maple leaf. It contained many worlds in its tiny body, veins through which God's love flowed, color, shape, size, all lovingly created with a spark of divinity. "Just think," it whispered, "there are billions upon billions of leaves in the world." Sounds like a miracle, doesn't it? It's God's assurance, the leaf said, that every person, every leaf, and everything else is a masterpiece. All of it is a masterpiece. A fawn was lying in a little hollow just about 8 feet from where I was sitting one morning. He got up to graze once in a while, and he would watch me for a few minutes before curling up again in his nest. My message to him was, "Thank you. Thank you for trusting me, for showing me your radiance. I see you. I see that you are a child of God, just as I am." The fawn answered wordlessly, raising his liquid brown eyes as if to say, "I am looking at you through God's eyes. Be at peace." Wandering through the woods, I bent down to look at a stone that was about the same size as my hand. For the first time in my life, I did something different. I asked its permission before I picked it up. Again, you're welcome to think I'm nuts if you want to. I picked it up. It just felt like the most respectful approach. I looked at it from various angles. I looked at all of its surfaces and smoothed my fingers over it. I recalled then that stones, often in the form of mountains, are the oldest elements on earth. They are the oldest form of life on this planet. They hold all the stories of Earth's origin because they were there. They are actually revered ancestors of ours. I placed the stone carefully back where I had found it with a whispered thank you. A spider caught my eye next, or rather its web caught my eye. The early morning dew transformed the web into a silvery, intricate form of art, breathtaking in its fragility and simplicity. Tears filled my eyes, tears of gratitude and wonder. How could such a tiny being design something so splendid, something of this magnitude, with that tiny little body that a spider has? Then I got the answer. I can only do it, the spider said, through the grace of God, just as you do what you do through the grace of God. I want to tell you about someone that's very special to me. I met her some years ago, and I've only met her once or twice, but she stuck with me. Her name is Polly. Polly is a turtle that belongs to Gloria and Hans Polar. She is 40-some years old, Gloria? Probably 50 years old now. This is what happens when you marry a man whose sons have a turtle. His sons moved out, leaving the turtle, and Gloria has been its mother ever since. But Polly, I don't usually think of amphibians or things like that as being holy, but when I met Polly, Gloria took such care to show me her habitat, and then we took her outside a little while, and she said, well, she likes this, but she doesn't like that. And then she wrapped her to show me how she holds Polly every day, wrapped in a little blanket when she does her prayer time. And I thought, my God, you are in there too. You are in Polly. And whenever I see Gloria, which is usually every Sunday, we don't forget to talk about Polly. She's a little annoyed right now, Polly is, because she hasn't been able to get outside very much. So, God and Polly, Polly Polar. What can we take away from these sacred conversations with nature? The contemplation, the beauty, the metaphysical messages, the holiness of all things. Over the centuries, it seems to me, humans have created God in our image, a very limited human image. Today, I hope that this reminds you that God is not only in all things, God is all things. The earth and everything in it, including us, is the body of Christ, which means we, like the animals, plants, the water, and the wind, are the voice, the spirit, the messengers of God on earth. One reason I've approached God in the natural world today without a focus on the human part of nature is because sometimes it's easier for us to interact with non-human entities, isn't it? They don't talk back, or at least we don't listen. Sometimes there are roadblocks in our interactions with other people, especially those whom we don't like or whom we don't understand. My hope, though, is that this message will call you to a deeper commitment to finding God in each other and even in yourself. I have another word for you. This is from my beautiful fallen cherry tree. I don't know why I can't turn these pages. Her message comes through loud and clear. Here's what she said. Even if we fall, we are still held in God's arms. God can use our falls, our so-called failures, Jerry said, to spread the seeds of love and kindness. Broken branches nourish insects. Stumps can become apartments for small animals. Broken people, despite their faults and their shortcomings, can be made whole through you, through your love, which is, of course, God's love. Ashe, Amin, Aho, Amen. And so it is.